Mr. Narendra Modi will attend the 2018 Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Qingdao. Do these interactions between China and India suggest a warming of relations after recent tensions between the two biggest developing countries? What is the potential for boosting cooperation and creating more opportunity? And what challenges are lurking in the relationship? To address these issues and more, I'm very pleased to be joined in the studio by Professor Swaran Singh from the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University and Professor Wang Dong of the School of International Studies at Peking University. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue. First of all, your thoughts on whether we have a thaw in the bilateral relationship, Dr. Wang.
Well, certainly, I think, yes, we are. As we all know, last year, I think our two countries have sort of experienced some difficulty, especially in the border issue. But since then, I think two countries also, I think, most importantly, come to realize that it is a fundamental interest for our two countries to maintain a stable and healthy relationship, and which is the consensus Prime Minister Modi and President Xi when they met in Xiamen last year, and I think that sort of became the guiding principle, I think, for our two governments, two countries, to look back and try to see, yes, we do have some differences on the border issue, but how to manage those differences and how to increase the area's cooperation so as to seize the moment and really to pave, I think, basis for a healthy and a stable and a mutually beneficial relations in the years to come. So I do see this as a very positive momentum going forward.
And Professor Singh, do you think the document which is followed by Xiamen Declaration should be regarded as the game changer?
I think in some ways that created a challenge and also opportunity. So what Dr. Wang just mentioned is called Astana Consensus, which has become very important axiom of bilateral relations, which says that both sides have committed now that they will not allow their differences to become disputes. And that is the kind of guiding principle now of China-India relations. So Doklam in that sense provided also opportunity to build better understanding with each other, especially at the level of President Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. During the crisis, if you recall, they met 3 times. First in Shanghai Cooperation Organization Astana Summit in June, then July in Hamburg for the G20 Summit, and then of course, as Professor Wang said, in Xiamen in September. The interesting part is that in all 3 meetings, their body language was always positive. So in that sense, both leaders have developed a certain amount of chemistry, and if you remember recently, after President Xi Jinping was given his 2nd tenure, Indian Prime Minister called him on phone and congratulated. And that is important signal that both leaders are sending, that there could be irritations on the ground, but there is a whole range of issues where China and India are also cooperating. You just mentioned 101 agreements signed last week. So a lot of it also positive, and therefore I think need to expand that positive energy is clearly understood by both sides.
The skeptical world is appreciative of both the showmanship and leadership of the two politicians. Do you think Prime Minister Modi is a secret superstar? A movie from Bollywood that had a very impressive box office in China.
Well, I think I would say that Prime Minister Modi is not a secret superstar. He is a superstar in many ways. He's regarded as one of the most strongest, most effective leaders of India for, I think, sort of decades, many decades, many years. And certainly he's sort of reform-oriented kind of policy approach. And he's a more pro sort of business kind of attitude. It's very good. So he's trying to sort of boost the jump up the economic reform of India, and that in itself also sort of created the opportunity. So I second Professor Singh's point. I think that truly the economic rise of India also presents a great opportunity for China and India to cooperate together and therefore to pursue for a win-win cooperation.
A broad issue, I'm afraid, gentlemen, is how do the two sides position each other in their foreign policy. China certainly does not regard India as a very, very serious threat. But India, ironically, may think the other way around, given the syndrome of the historical mistrust or whatever since 1962, and the Kashmir Economic Corridor, the nuclear suppliers group, so on and so forth. You have a long list of issues that have created tensions and mistrust, at least a part of the media fanfare on both sides. First of all, the Chinese position about the importance of India in the new era.
Well, of course, India, in terms of China's foreign policy portfolio, is very important. India is one of the most, I think, important partner of China in many multilateral international issues, global challenges. China and India actually, basically, fundamentally, we do share the common views, same views about what the international order, how the global order should be evolving. And both as developing countries, we also support very strongly the free trade system. And also on the variety of the global governance sort of issues, challenges, climate change, be it counter-piracy, etc. China and India all have a very similar shared view.
Professor Singh, I'm afraid that China's perception about India may have been misplaced, given the fact that most Indian Asian policymakers regard themselves or India itself as a game changer. Your side with China or the United States, for example, in the alleged Indo-Pacific region would definitely change the equilibrium geopolitically, and therefore Indians believe New Delhi must be taken very seriously on the following issues, such as those I listed: nuclear supplies group, a permanent membership of the UN Security Council, as well as Belt and Road Initiative. What do you think of our perception about the India consensus?
Thank you, Yang Rui. Through you, I would in fact use this opportunity to share this with your audience in China and abroad. The fundamental principle that has guided India's foreign policy was called non-alignment. So India is very sensitive to not join any of the alliances. That is today called multi-alignments, because as Dr. Wang mentioned about the rise of India, everybody talks of rise of China. There is a change in India, so we are now saying multi-alignments means India is trying to connect with as many countries in as many sectors as possible, being more pragmatic. So aligning or getting closer to United States in no way compromises India's interest and enthusiasm about other nations. For example, Iran, which United States wouldn't like us to be very close to, but we have a strategic partnership, and the President recently visited India. We are also very close to Russia, China, India strategic triangle. So it's multi-alignment which is a guiding principle. And now it comes to Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific so far is only an idea. And in fact, I go to the extent of saying the germination of this idea lies in rise of China. The Pacific and Indian Oceans are joined together because of enormous commerce that China has created over a period of time, say last 3 decades. That has joined this whole region as a new geopolitical frame, which is now being called Indo-Pacific. So China is a trigger of this idea. Why should China stay as an outlier? China should be part of the debate. Second, very quick clarification, sometimes it is misunderstood that Indo-Pacific is for India. It is Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean, Indo-Pacific. And Indian Ocean is ownership of all the littoral states together. So sometimes too much misunderstanding, because it seems like, oh, India means Indo-Pacific means India.
Very much the way South China Sea should not be regarded as the backyard of China, simply because of the name itself.
Exactly. So sometimes those old ideas continue to rehash and circulate, which is a dangerous thing to happen.
What lessons can we learn from Dr. Wang Dong?
One thing we have to learn really is the kind of restraint of public opinion. And more or less to some extent it become more nationalistic oriented. Then how to manage that it becomes a big challenge, I think, for each country, both countries' foreign policy making.
Well, I'm afraid this dialogue is not just about goodwill. It's about how to find a solution to our great concerns on each side. Let's look at them one by one. What about the Belt and Road Initiative that the Chinese are tremendously interested in addressing, and the Indians were upset because of the very name of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which goes through part of Kashmir. You know how serious the differences have been between Pakistan and India over this issue since that war with the partition in the 1940s. Professor Singh, what is your expectation about the summit meeting on the sidelines of the SCO in Qingdao? Do you expect to have a breakthrough?
A breakthrough in what sense?
About the economic corridor concerning the Belt and Road Initiative.
Sure. I think first, again, the kind of popular narrative about India boycotting BRI, I need to clarify that. India is only absenting itself from CPEC. India has not attended the May last year forum that was organized in Beijing. But there are a whole other set of activities where India is participating. For example, BCIM Economic Corridor, which is seen as part of BRI, which is Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar Economic Corridor. Just 4 weeks before the May summit in Beijing, the study group had a consultation in Kolkata, eastern city of India. We are second largest stakeholder in AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is supposed to fund these projects. India now is member of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where every time the declaration praises BRI and endorses. So it's not that India is boycotting the whole BRI project. Yes, now you mentioned about China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. India has serious problems with that because it runs through a territory which not only India but even China recognizes as disputed territory. And when Asian Development Bank wants to fund a project on Indian province called Arunachal Pradesh, China says they should not fund projects in disputed territories. But China is funding projects in disputed territory. Even if you ignore India, there is an agreement of 1963 March 3rd between China and Pakistan to resolve the Xinjiang border with Pakistan occupied Kashmir, as we call it. Clause 6 of that agreement says this will be renegotiated once Kashmir dispute is resolved. So officially China recognizes through that document it's a disputed territory. Now you build projects on that territory and call it Pakistan. Now, that is something that you need not only explain to India, but perhaps you need to explain to your own people. How did that policy change? For what reasons? And of course, because it infringes on India's sovereignty, India has decided not to participate in that project.
Thank you so much. You are watching Dialogue with Dr. Wang Dong from the School of International Studies at Peking University and Professor Swaran Singh, a senior expert of South Asian Studies and International Politics. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, gentlemen. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed a memorandum to impose $60 billion in tariffs on imports from China, as well as restrictions on China's investment in the U.S. Is China showing increased efforts to smooth trade relations with India because of this? And do you think the strained trade relationship between Washington and Beijing will benefit our relationship with India? And this has a huge geo-economic implications.
Well, first of all, I would say China-India, economically speaking, we have a very important trade economic ties. So China is the largest trading partner of India, and India actually is the 6th largest trading partner, but also the largest trading partner in in the region, in South Asia, and also the largest destination for Chinese investment. So there's, but last year we look at the trade number. The bilateral trade is in total of $84 billion, which is set at a historical record. But compared to, I think, the economic sort of scale of our market of our two countries, still I think there's sort of lags behind. Still I think there's a huge potential for both countries to pick it up. And of course there's also, on top of that, there's a trade imbalance issue. But the good news is that last year I think the Chinese import from India increases by 40%, which is almost 18.5% of growth. If that continues in the that trend continued, I think that that means that we will see a more balanced trade ties between our two countries. And in addition to that, I think the Chinese investment also going very much. The cumulative investment in India now is $8 billion. So that shows the kind of great potential, I think, for our two countries to going forward. And then you mentioned the Trump administration, United States, they sort of, in a way, pulling back from the global trade system. And I would argue that that also perhaps both present a challenge but also opportunity for our two countries, China and India, how to work together and how to facilitate, further trade and investment between our two countries, among many things, and also including regional and like ICEP negotiations, whether we can put more initiatives into that, and also how to uphold altogether the global trading system.
Professor Xing, the Chinese economy is 5 times yours. And you once said, with regard to India, there is an increasing internalization of the growing asymmetry with China. What are the main aspects of this asymmetry, do you think, and what are the solutions?
I think, first of all, it is important to understand in India that China has really, as you said, taken a leap forward. $13.6 trillion compared to India's $2.6 trillion economy. So that has to be understood as we think of China policy. It is not easy. At emotional level, China and India were, even in economic terms, very similar about 30 years ago. And in 30 years, things have changed. But second important thing to underline is it is only in economics and the growth rates of economy that China has had a leap forward. In terms of culture, in terms of size of population, expanding middle class, education levels, international connections, credibility at global level, nuclear weapons, everything else, we are still similar. So there is a specific bandwidth of economic rise of China, which has to be calibrated in Indian policy, and that's not easy to imagine that you are going to play a kind of a junior partner role. It's not easy for a nation that prides itself of ancient history, wisdom, and all kinds of other contributions to international relations. But it is gradually sinking in, and that's why I use the word internalizing. Understanding is one level, then internalizing is another level, where you begin to calibrate and engage China from that perspective. But Chinese have to also contribute to that process. And I think one area where that is happening is our meetings in various multilateral forums, where we find our interests, engagements, initiatives, approaches, orientations are all so similar. And that generates a certain bonhomie and feeling of camaraderie, which has a positive impact on bilateral relations. And that's how you see in 2013, in 2014, and then last year in 2017, we had tensions on the border. But we used consultation, and consultative mechanism were ultimately able to bring out some kind of a resolution of these disputes. But that asymmetry in economic prowess, shall we say, is something that has to be calibrated in India in making China policy. But Chinese side have also to equally contribute to create those comfort level, where that kind of changing relation doesn't begin to be perceived as a threat or bullying. And that is something which both have to do together, and not one side can do it alone. And I think some of it is already happening, I'm saying. And in many of these forums, you can notice that approach of India is very different. If you have noticed, for example, there is a lot of criticism domestically and the way India is dealing with the Tibetans who live in India. Their events have been kind of controlled in a certain manner. Officials have been told not to attend those. Some people relate it to maybe the new way of conducting policy with China, where if China is very sensitive on certain issues, we perhaps have to demonstrate our commitment to China's sensitivities. And it's not easy to do. Again, there's criticism. There's
Professor Singh, you said 30 or 40 years ago we were at the same level economically. What are the reasons that have prevented India from moving forward as quickly to catch up? I know this is a very complicated, picture. It won't be easy for you to give us a short answer, but tell us the first 3 or 2 reasons.
I think if I was to pinpoint what really looks as difference between China and India, it's the one-party rule that China has. That has its own advantages. There is no opposition. There's no kind of robust federation that India is. No multi-party system that India is. And therefore, there are disjunctions between visions and implementations at different levels in India. That has its own benefits. You know, it's very likely that if you move slower, you are less likely to make mistakes, and mistakes are going to be less disastrous.
But the alleged state capitalism has come under heavy fire from the United States, so that's why they take China as a strategic competitor. Having said this, what do you think of the impact of Prime Minister Modi's reform in the fiscal and monetary policy?
I think these are systemic changes, and it won't be easy. Though you can see the immediate impact, which is not very positive to be much in the view, but the positive impact of this is expected to take longer time to streamline and deliver. So maybe we'll have to wait several years down the line to see how those fundamental changes really produced. Did it give a certain boost to Indian economy? If you notice the last quarter, India is the fastest growing economy on the planet, 7.2%. Is that related to those systemic changes? Difficult to connect at this stage. But if that process continues, then that will be seen as important decisions that Prime Minister made.
In short, what will be the deliverables at the upcoming summit between Prime Minister Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Qingdao?
Well, I think the more specific, I think once prediction becomes, I think the more risk is of course involved. So I'm trying to be a bit of a broad here. I'm trying to be risk neutral here.
Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. I think one of the first one is trust, political trust. Extremely important for the two leaders to sort of re-emphasize and basically engage in a strategic reassurance about each other's intention, and fundamentally about the importance that the rise of India presents opportunity rather than a threat to China, and vice versa. The rise of China presents opportunity rather than a threat to India. And fundamentally, how the relationship will be healthy and a stable relationship will be in both country relationship, fundamental interests. But also, secondly, also very important, I think, for both sides to make a very clear commitment, I think, to while managing the tensions and firmly try to promote trade and investment relations between our two countries. There are many things we can do. Even economists have been talking about why not we can start discussion about the possibility of start off the discussion about negotiation about free trade agreement. Maybe too early, but certainly, I think it's moment, it's time for us. We can think more substantively about pushing forward our trade and economy.
So the Qingdao summit of SCO will lay groundwork for more consensus building and confidence building. FTA is one of the options on the table. What are your thoughts?
I think for India, terrorism remains a very important issue. So that would be really flagged very seriously by India there. Other than the bonhomie which is happening at bilateral level, that issue is important for Shanghai Cooperation Organization together, for all the nations. Second is about energy security. China and India are major consumers, but other nations as part of Shanghai Cooperation Organizations are major source of energy. How to really complement that relationship? And I am particularly interested the way Wang Yi, now State Councillor, talks about recently how India and China 1+1 need not be equal to 2 but 11. And I think that shows, just like I said, India is recalibrating understanding of the asymmetry with China. I think there is also growing understanding in China to recognize India as the most important and largest neighbor of China in the neighborhood. And if the way we look at each other changes, then policies and initiatives would flow from there, and I think that is happening at certain level. Maybe it will grow in coming years.
They talk about this big dialogue